James Van Der Zee. James Van Der Zee was born in Lenox, Massachusetts on June 29, 1886. He is the second of six siblings born to Elizabeth and John Van Der Zee. Van Der Zee was the second of six children and enjoyed a close-knit, comfortable family life. He grew up in a home where art and music were important. Van Der Zee learned to play the violin and piano and frequently tried drawing. When he found that an image could be reproduced more easily with a camera, his interest turned to photography. With his brother Walter, James Van Der Zee departed for Harlem, New York in 1906. Once there, he held jobs as a waiter and an elevator operator. For several years after that, Van Der Zee put his musicianship to use, playing with Fletcher Henderson's band and the John Wanamaker Orchestra while also working as a piano and violin teacher. James opened up his own Harlem studio in 1916. Van Der Zee became known for his detailed imagery of African American life. The Harlem Renaissance was in full swing during the 1920s and 30s, and for decades, Van Der Zee would photograph Harlemites of all backgrounds and occupations. Though his work is particularly noted for its pioneering depiction of middle-class African American life, he took thousands of pictures, mostly indoor portraits, and labeled each of his photos with a signature and date, which would prove to be important for future documentation. Throughout this time, Van Der Zee was known as the Eyes of Harlem. Although Van Der Zee photographed many African American celebrities, including Florence Mills, Hazel Scott, and Adam Clayton Powell Jr., most of his work was straightforward. Weddings, family groups, lodges, clubs, and people simply wanting to have a record of themselves in fine clothing. He often supplied props or costumes and took time to carefully pose his subjects, giving an accessible narrative. Van Der Zee once stated, "I try to see that every picture was better looking than the person." A lady once asked Mr. Van Der Zee, "Mr. Van Der Zee, my friends tell me that you take good photography, but it doesn't look like you." He replied saying that was just my style. Due to the Second World War and with the advent of the personal camera, the desire for Van Der Zee's services dwindled. He procured less and less commissions, though he maintained an alternative business in image restoration and mail order sales. Van Der Zee and his wife still faced financial difficulties. After they were evicted from their Harlem residence, they relocated to the Bronx. His wife died in 1976, and Van Der Zee was reported to be living in squalor and poor health. In 1981, Van Der Zee filed a suit to reclaim more than 50,000 images from the Studio Museum of Harlem, the rights to which he had signed away after his eviction. The case would be settled posthumously, with half of the work being returned to the photographer's estate and the remainder being retained by the museum and the James Van Der Zee Institute. He became a permanent fellow of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and received a Living Legacy Award from President Jimmy Carter. After receiving an honorary doctorate from Howard University, Van Der Zee died of a heart attack at age 96 on May 15, 1983 in Washington, D.C. His work has continued to be celebrated for the past several years with special exhibitions honoring his legacy. Photographer Reginald Magee, who rediscovered Van Der Zee in the late 1960s, wrote in the introduction to The World of James Van Der Zee, His works have brought a tremendous amount of warmth, pride, and true insight into the long neglected history of Black Americans. Deborah Willis, author of the retrospect Vander Zee Photographer, states, "For Vander Zee, studio photography seems to have been a form of theater, an opportunity to tell a story with deliberately fictionalized elements. His favorite techniques including retouching negatives, hand tinting prints, and using double exposures." James Van Der Zee once quoted, "Happiness is like perfume. You can't pour it on somebody else without getting a few drops on yourself."